In this week's parashat Vayakhel Pekudei, we're finishing up Sefer Shemot, Chazak, Chazak, Mitchazek. We're finishing up our long discussion, 5 parashas long, of how to build the temple, what the temple is all about, how to get that Mishkan going, actually building it in our parasha. We have the end of the story of the Mishkan, who did it, how we did it, all those final details of actually building it. Also, this week is a special parasha. We're ending off the month of Adar right now, so it's Shabbat Mevarchin. We're going to bless the new moon of Nissan. We also read a special haftarah, a special maftir. It's the last of the 4 parashiyot. Parashat HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people in Egypt. We have ourselves Rosh Chodesh. We're getting ready for Nissan, for the geulah of Pesach. So in this Torah, I thought we'll have a little fun. Let's try to connect a little bit our parasha, a little bit the month of Adar to the month of Nissan, get ourselves a little bit ready for the geulah of Pesach, as we're going to connect the geulah of Purim with Purim of the to the geulah of Pesach with a really deep idea, a cool idea that I saw in Sefer Emunat Itecha, so Rav Moshe Wolfsohn. It's actually a Devar Torah he gives about Purim, but I think it connects a little bit to our parasha, because if you look back in the past at our previous Divrei Torah over the years, we've spoken a lot this week about Ohaliav ben Achisamach Lemateh Dan. We spoke a lot about who built the Mishkan in the desert. So there were 2 great artisans. There was the main guy in charge, Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur Lemateh Yehuda. The first main guy was from the tribe of Yehuda. Yehuda is the tribe of the Mashiach. This is the Abba of David HaMelech, the Mashiach ben David ben Yehuda eventually, meaning we have the tribe of Yehuda, the lion. That's going to be the Betzel Kelly. He's in the shadow of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, building that tent for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ohel Moed, the Mishkan for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And his number 1 helper, the number 2 guy to build it, the number 2 artisan, the number 2 sculptor, the builder, is Ohaliav. Again, Ohaliav, a language of an Ohel Av, building a tent for the Abba Shabashamayim. Ohaliav ben Ahisamach, he's the guy that holds up his brothers, Lemateh Dan, from the tribe of Dan. And we spoke in the past a lot of Divrei Torah. B'ezrat Hashem, I'm going to post a bunch on Spotify of the old Divrei Torah, but I have a lot more that B'ezrat Hashem we're going to be posting throughout the year, this year, next year, of old Divrei Torah. But we know, I love the tribe of Dan. Shevet Dan is unbelievable. Shevet Dan, we said the mother of Mashiach comes from Dan. Dan is that tribe. Rashi says, why are we adding Dan to Yehuda? Yehuda is known as the highest of the tribes, the most elevated, the most spiritual, the king, the Melech, the Mashiach. While Dan is known to be the Yerud, the Yehudim, they're the lowest of the tribes. They're the tribes that had messed up. They messed up quite a bit throughout Jewish history, particularly when it comes to desire, ta'ava, when it comes to avodah zarah. They're the ones that take the pesel mika. They're the ones that have the avodah zarah that took through the splitting of the Yam Suf, and they're the ones in the future that are going to have the same issues. They're Shlomit bat Divri, the Mateh Dan, the one who's going to sin, the only woman to sin with an Egyptian. So let's try to Dan her the kaf zachut and say that maybe it wasn't beratzon, but the only sin of sexual immorality comes through the tribe of Dan. So we mentioned in the past that Dan is the one that had emunah issues, that had Yetzer Hara issues. But we also spoke in the past that even though they were the lowest ones, they were the neheshalim. They were the ones that Amalek. Let's connect over a little bit. We spoke about Purim and Haman, but we're also finishing up the whole Amalek talk. That when Amalek attacks the neheshalim, so the Targum Yonatan, as well as we find it in the Gra, as well other sources, midrashim, that who were the neheshalim, who were the weak ones in the back of the bus that were attacked. That were attacked by Amalek. It's the tribe of Dan, because Dan were spit out of the clouds. They had been kicked out because of their avodah zarah, because of their sin. But despite being that lowest level, we learn that Ohaliab, he's now going to be the number 2 guy to help build the Mishkan, which either means we have a very good self-esteem Dvar Torah, that even if you don't come from the greatest background, if you step it up big time, you can be that number 1, you can be that number 2, you could be the one that actually builds the temple, you can build the Mishkan. Doesn't matter what your origin story is, you can be that great level. But then we said even more, mystically speaking, is those that are on the lowest level, those are the ones that are really going to step it up. Those are the ones that eventually, Latid Labo, in the times of Mashiach, the tribe of Dan is going to join together with the tribe of Yehuda, as we spoke a lot about in the past, and it's going to dafka be, we need that koach of Dan, we need those people that seem to be the back of the bus, to ultimately, when they step it up, they're going to save everybody. Okay, so now I want to look at Sefer Emunat Itecha, Rav Moshe Wolfsohn. This is Dvar Torah on Purim, but I think it connects to a lot of the themes of Dan and the time of the year that we are right now, because in his Sefer, he likes to take the holidays, takes the parshas, and connect them to the time of year that we're in. Okay, so it says as follows. Says Rav Wolfsohn, Yadua, it's known, sheyud bet shevatim mechuvanim keneged yud bet chodashim. Says you should know we have a principle that we have ourselves 12 tribes, and the 12 tribes correspond to the 12 months. So every tribe corresponds to a month. Now we spoke in the past that there are machlokot between midrashim and rishonim and different opinions of which tribe goes with which month, which we're going to see in a second. We're going to talk about in 1 second. But so there's not a clear list, but we have a couple of lists of which tribe goes with which month. So he says, Va'arizah lefigir the Arizal, based on his girsa in the Sefer Yetzirah, so he writes, Sider Tashvatim Lefi Seder Diglei Midbar. And he says that the months correspond to how they traveled in the deserts, how the Degalim were in the desert. So when we get to Parshat Bamidbar, we're going to divide the 12 tribes. They're going to surround the Aron and they're going to travel. So he says, Dahainu Nissan Sheyach LeYehuda. So the first month goes to Yehuda because Yehuda is the first of the 12 tribes to travel. They're on the east side, traveling towards Yerushalayim, towards Eretz Yisrael. Yehuda travels first, so the first month goes to Yehuda. Iyar, so Yehuda had with him Yisachar and Zvulun. Those are the 3 tribes on the east side. So the second tribe to travel, according to the Arizal, is going to be the tribe of Yisachar. They go in the order that they traveled in the desert. V'yesh min ha'geonim shesidram lefi seder toldo tehem. He says that there are other geonim that says no. The months don't go on how they traveled, rather the months go on how they were born. Or the Fizeh, Nissan Shayach LeReuven, and therefore the month of Nissan will be Reuven's month. So we have ourselves a bit of a machloket amongst the Geonim, amongst the Arizal. What order do we go through? Okay. Then he says, Rabbi Yaakov Emden also put it in his Sidur, he also, in the Tefillah, he also did it based on how they were born. He says, there's also other options. And then he quotes an unbelievable idea from the Pri Tzaddik. ובספר פרי צדיק, מאמרי ראש חודש כסלו עוד זין, says Rav Tzadok HaKohen, ביאר שהכל אמת, it's all emet. You should know the different orders as they go based on birth order, based on travel order, when we're moving, when we're not moving, how it changes. כי לפעמים מופיע בנפש כוח זה, לפעמים כוח זה. So says Rav Tzadok, he wants to make peace with the machlokot, and he says that which month corresponds to which tribe might have something to do with what's going on in the world at that exact moment and how we're moving. He says as follows, Varizal, yiches et chodesh Adar, yiches et chodesh Adar, the Shevet and Naphtali. Says the Arizal said, and what's the last month of the year? What's the month of Adar? We're finishing up now Adar. That corresponds to Naphtali. Why? Ki hu acharon shebediglei midbar, because he was the last one to travel. Ultimately, we had 4 sides with three on each side, and the very last of the 12 to travel is Naphtali. והוזכר האחרונה בפרשת במדבר. וכן בקורבנות הנשיאים, so too when we look at the korbanot, when we inaugurated the Mishkan in the desert, so all of them, all of the tribal leaders brought according to their degel, according to the way that they traveled, and who brought on the last day? Ubiyom Shnemasar Yom, Nasi Levnei Naphtali, the last day went to Naphtali. So Naphtali it would be the 12th according to the way the Arizal would learn, according to the way that they traveled. But, says the Amunat Itecha, the Parshat Balotecha, but he says when we speak about Parshat Balotecha, it says Seder HaNesi'ah, when it talks about the travelings themselves, this is the Parshat Vayi bin So Aaron, Vayom Moshe, when they're traveling, Kativ, Benesa Machane Bnei Dan, Ma'asef L'kol HaMachanot. It says that Bnei Dan, they traveled last because they were the Ma'asef, the Kol HaMachanot, because they had gathered everything in. And it says Rashi over there, based on the Yerushalmi, Shevet Dan nosea ba'achrona. Shevet Dan travels last. Why? Because if anybody would lose anything, they're the Ma'asef the Kol HaMachanot, they would return anything that was lost along the way. They were the lost and found, so they traveled last to collect all the stuff that was lost. Now, in the past, we spoke in a more deeper sense that they would also bring back the lost souls. Shevet Dan, who themselves were known for sinning in the past, making mistakes. Any Jew that got lost along the way, they understood how to connect to the individual. They weren't necessarily the Yehuda, the collectivist, the whole national type of Yehuda, leading the whole people. That's the Yehuda's more koch of how to lead everybody in the bigger sense. Dan was more individualistic with more individual mistakes, personal desires, personal issues. When they learned how to conquer it, they were the ones that knew how to teach everybody else how to conquer it. So they were there to save the individual souls along the way, which is why we said in the past, Yehuda's the Mashiach's father is going to come from Yehuda, because the father is the leader, that the type for the whole people, thinking about the greater family, while the mother of Mashiach is going to come from the tribe of Dan, because the mother thinks about every individual kid, especially those kids that are so far away religiously, Jewishly, halachically, they're so far from God. Shevet Dan is that tribe that knows how to find and save those people. So based on this, says Rav Wolfsohn, Shevet Dan is the last one to travel. So therefore, if Shevet Dan is the last one to travel, they might be the last month as well. Now, he brings down a bit of a machloket of how the traveling worked. What does it mean they were last? Because you can say, you know what it means they were last to travel? Shevet Dan was the last to travel because they were the leader of the last 3 to travel. So really, maybe we could say Naphtali was the last to travel, but the whole grouping over there is under the tribe of Dan, and that's what we mean they're the last to travel. Not necessarily that they're number 12, but they lead the last 3 to go, and that's called the last ones. But then he goes on and say that no, it might not be that way. And he brings a machloket of how they traveled. Were they traveling in a line? Were they traveling in a box kind of shape? But he says it could be that the way they were traveling is that ultimately, as Dan boxed out the rest of the people, he actually was the last to travel. And then he gives another approach, which he says, or we could say, we know that Shevet Dan was very, very large. That they had an increase, a population increase that was so great that he said there might have been Shevet Dan that was the main Shevet Dan. But then there were a lot of extra people, and maybe those extra people, where was their place? They put them in the very back to do that lost and found. And he says they even go behind the Ephraim people. He has a whole way of how he understands the square shape of how they were walking. Because Dan is really on the north. So if he's on the north, is he really the last to travel? Or is Ephraim in the back, in the west, the last to travel? So he has a whole, you can check him out there for the details of how this stuff would work out. But he says, according to this approach, maybe we're going to say that Dan had some extras. So either Dan was the last to travel, or his section was the last to travel, and we call him the last to travel, or there were extra Dans who moved to the back to help those who needed to be in the back. And those who had to move to the back, he says that there's two ways to learn it. Either, it could be voluntarily, or it could be maybe they were pushed out of the back, because we know that they were sinners. Who were the nechashalim? When Amalek attacks the weak ones in the back, who were the weak ones in the back? So according to one approach, the weak ones in the back were the people who had sinned with Avodah Zarah, that the clouds had spit them out. And who was that? According to the Targum Yonatan, that was Shevet Dan. Shevet Dan, who had the Pesel Mika, they had taken the idol with them, they were spit out of the clouds. But he says, who was spit out of the clouds? So he says, either you can say the whole tribe was spit out of the clouds, or you can say there were certain individuals who would be the bigger sinners. They were the ones that were spit out. So when they were spit out, they didn't walk where their tribe walked, they walked in the very back. So they are the very last line to be walking. So he says, based on these two approaches, that either Dan really was the last one to walk, or that the extras of Dan were the last to walk, he says, maybe now we can re-understand a little bit the months, like the Pri Tzadik says, that all of it might be true just based on where we're holding in life. So he says, when the Arizal says that it goes based on where they actually were, based on flags, based on that, so the Arizal puts them as the 9th tribe to go, and that would be Chodesh Tevet. He says that might be true when they're not moving, when they're staying still, when you actually land, when you actually settle. We know, we spoke when we actually settle in the land of Israel. So the Ikar place of Dan is supposed to be next to Yehuda. It's the Tel Aviv area, which is not too far from Yerushalayim. So we have ourselves Dan is next to Judea. That's when you actually settle. Although we know there's a little bit of Dan up in the corner by the Golan, by the Leshem area. That's for those, again, they can never fully make it, so they get kicked out to the back. So you even see that Dan himself seems to have an external part that's all the way in the corner. Okay, cool Dan ideas. But he says the Arizal puts him in Tebet. He goes, that's maybe when we're settled. But Aval Bazman Nesiyah. But he says when we're actually traveling in that parasha, B'halotecha, by Ibn So'aron, where over there it says that Dan is Masef L'Kol HaMechanot, where there Rashi tells us, based on the Yerushalmi, that he's in the back. Maybe when they're traveling, then he really goes to the back. And what does traveling mean? Nesiyah, he says, Meramez Azman Galut. That's talking about the times of the exile, that we haven't come to rest yet. We didn't come to our Nachala. We're still in Hechshech Ve'Ester. We're still in darkness. And that corresponds to the month of Adar. The month of Adar is the month of the whole story of Purim. It takes place in the exile. It takes place in Persia. It's not an Israeli holiday. It's one of the reasons why, according to some, we don't say Hallel on Purim. It's because we're out there in the exile. We're out there in the Galut. It's a holiday of the Galut. So he says, when we're traveling, when we're in Galut, then we could say, maybe we would say at that point, Shevet Dan is the month of Adar. So according to the Emunat Yitecha, big hidush, says Rav Moshe Wolfsohn, he's actually saying by Ibn So'aron, when we're busy traveling, when we're busy in the Galut, we're in that darkest, we're in that lowest spot, we're in that biggest Hester Panim, it's Shevet Dan that's going to be the month of Adar. So that would be one approach. You can PM me for the Dvar Torah we gave a couple of years ago on Purim about the hidden Dan throughout the Megillah, the number 54. Okay, side ideas. But then he gives a second approach. He said, but approach number 2 was that maybe Dan corresponds to the people that were kicked out. Dan corresponds to the people that were who were the final people walking at the very, very end. It wasn't Shevet Dan. It was the people of Shevet Dan that had been spit out of the clouds due to messing up, or due to HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanting them to be there. He brings that as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately has bigger ideas. So he says, based on the Yerushalmi, maybe we can have another idea. I know this year wasn't a leap year, but many years we have a leap year, and you have Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni. He says, if every tribe corresponds to a month, then which month corresponds to the 13th month? When we have 2 Adars, who does the 13th go to? So now the question is, do we want to break up Yosef, Ephraim, Menashe, Levi? There are ways to get to a 13th month, but says Rav Wolfsohn, massive hidush. Maybe we could say that Adar Sheni corresponds to those people from Dan that had been kicked out of the camp. They were no longer part of Machane Yisrael. They were no longer part of the clouds, so they were kicked out. So where are they? What's their month? Their month goes to Adar Sheni. Now he says Adar Sheni is very, very big. It's a very big month, especially if you have the Siddur with the Kavanot. A lot of Siddurs, even Ashkenazi Siddurs, have Kavanot of, like, every month is a special way to understand God's name. But the 13th month, that you have all the names together, there's a lot of Kiddushat to Adar Sheni. He brings down based on the Yerushalmi that Purim took place on Adar Sheni according to the Yerushalmi. We know Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, he brings down here that maybe it could be that Moshe Rabbeinu's death also was in Adar Sheni, not in Adar Rishon. And he says the whole concept of Adar Sheni, what's the concept of Adar Sheni? So the idea of Adar Sheni is to take the lunar calendar and the solar calendar and try to reconcile the two. That after not having a bunch of leap years, eventually, every day you're like 11 days earlier, eventually the sun and moon get a little bit off the yearly calendar. So we have to put together the sun and the moon. Who does the sun correspond to? So we have famous Divrei Torah, the sun is Hashem, we are the moon. But there's other ideas that the sun corresponds to the Umot HaOlam, to the non-Jewish world. They're the ones who think that they're strong, they think that they're powerful, they're the sun, they can do it on their own, while we are the moon who's going to wax and wane. The Jewish people are waxing and waning at the moon, the better times, the worst times, the darkness, the light. So we have ourselves the Shemesh and the Yareach, and especially when it comes to Amalek, which is the Esav. Esav really does correspond to the Shemesh, the Western world, the Christian world. They're based on the solar calendar. There's a little bit of ideas that the Muslim world, they have a lunar calendar, so they might also be a little bit Yareachi. But the Esav world, the Amalek world, that's Shemesh. When the tribe of Dan is messing up, they're in the galut and they're doing more umot haolam kind of things. They're kind of acting a little bit like a shemesh. They're kind of acting a little bit less like a moon. They're not in the moon world. But comes Adar Sheni, he says, comes the second Adar for these people that are so lost, that have gone so far gone. You think they're gone? They're not so gone. We're going to bring them back. We're going to bring them back into Machaneh Yisrael. We're going to bring them back into the count of the 12 months. We're going to add a 13th month for those people that seem to be lost, for those people from the tribe of Dan, and we're going to bring them back in. And even though they look like a Chama, we're going to now reconcile the moon and the sun, bring them back together, so we can bring back these Jewish people back into the months of the Jewish people, back into the Jewish calendar as well. And then based on that, so what's going to happen? Now we're going to connect ourselves to Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, to the month of Nissan, by adding this Adar Sheni, by adding in the tribe of Dan, and Dan being this last month. We're saying, no, you are part of the calendar, but now Dan, what are we going to do? We're going to connect you directly to the month of Nissan, to the month of Yehuda, to the month of the lion, to the month of, he says, the idea of a Chodesh is hitchadshut, of renewal. You thought that it was so dark. You thought the galut was so terrible. Adar, it's the winter time, but now comes the month of Aviv, comes the springtime, comes the geulah of Nissan, and we're now going to attach Dan to Yehuda. And just like we said, when we actually settle in the land of Israel, the area of Dan is going to be next to the area of Yehuda. And like we're saying, even when we travel, if we look, even if we say Dan travels last, but when they stop, Dan is on the north and Yehuda is on the east. They're right next to each other in the circle. We have this bigger circle where we're bringing Dan next to the circle. We're bringing him back in. We're either having a regular Adar, or we're adding even an Adar Sheni based on the second approach. We're bringing them all together, and we're going to say there's going to be a geulah here as well. The people of Dan as well, they might look hidden away. They might look like sinners. It might look astir, the Esther, the hiddenness. No, even in the most dark of the dark, and specifically in the dark of the dark, that's where you should wake up and realize, oh my God, there's going to be a geulah. We're going to get ourselves to Nissan. We're going to get ourselves to the springtime. We're going to get ourselves to the sun. And sometimes we have to reconcile. We have to add an extra month to get there, but we're going to do it. And even in those darkest times, there is a hatzalah. There is going to be this redemption. It says Rav Wolfsohn, Haman made a mistake. When he did the lottery and it came up to the month of Adar, and according to this approach, Adar Sheni even, he said, oh, this is great. Do you know why? This is the month that Moshe Rabbeinu died. There's no more life force to Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no more chiyut. The koach of Moshe Rabbeinu is no longer with the Jewish people. He says, sadly, these Jewish people are so spread out and they're so sinners that, they're meforah, they're yeshno amecha, they're yashenim, they're sleeping. They're so far away. They're so far gone. They've lost met Moshe mitoch libot bnei Yisrael chas v'shalom. They've lost their connection to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe has died. But what he didn't realize, that Chazal tell us, but you know what else? What happened on this month? Moshe Rabbeinu was born. And everyone says, okay, what do you mean Moshe Rabbeinu was born? Well, so what? So Moshe's born, Moshe died. So, okay, so what does it mean? We go according to birth, we go according to death? So what he's saying is, no, there's a spiritual idea over here. There's hitchadshut, there's renewal. Moshe dies in the month of Adar, but he's also born. There's also the beginning of the birth, of the rebirth, of a Chodesh Hazeh Lachem. Adar gets connected to Nissan. The way it all comes together, that you think you're going to get lost, you think you're not going to make it. Well, the tribe of Dan is here right now to save those people who got lost, to save those things that got lost, to bring everybody back to Avinu Sheba Shamayim. That's the koach of the month of Adar. He didn't realize, Haman, that the birth of Moshe is here too, meaning there's renewal, there's hitchadshut. Moshe, you don't see Moshe? No, Moshe's here. He's just being born. Now is the dark part of the month where the light's about to start. The Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, we're about to get there at the very end. We're going to make it. And he explains further, this also explains, right before Purim, we read Parashat Tetzaveh. Parashat Tetzaveh is the one parasha where Moshe Rabbeinu's name, we can't find it anywhere in the parasha. It was hidden away. We know the famous Dvar Torah, Moshe said, erase me from the Torah. So Hashem waits till the very last moment to erase him from Parashat Tetzaveh. But he says, and even though we know the whole parasha is talking about Moshe, that Moshe is really there, you just don't see him openly. He's the Atah. He's the one that God is speaking to. But he says, because we think before Purim time, in the month of Adar, in the month of the Galut, in the month where the Jewish people seem so far away, we think that the Bechinat Moshe, Kol Kach Behelim Ba'aretz, we think that Moshe Rabbeinu, the aspect of Moshe is hidden. We can't find Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is Chas v'Shalom. He's not with us anymore. Chas v'Shalom. He says, no. Moshe is there. The whole parsha is talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. He writes, the parsha starts off speaking about the Shemen Zayit Zach, about that pure olive oil. So I think what he's trying to get to is that, he had the oil, with the Hanukkah's Torah, we always talk about that Pintel Yid, that hidden down deep inside, there really is that potential for the great light to come out. But you got to squeeze those olives, get to that the extra virgin olive oil. And over there, when you light it, it looks like nothing right now. But when you light it, the great fire is going to happen. So we're in the dark time. We're ending the dark period. The month of Adar, especially Adar Sheni, is the very end. We're getting closer to the springtime. The winter is about to end. It's the darkest of the dark. But you have to realize that from this darkness, we learn from Purim, we're going to nitapech. It's going to flip from sason to simcha to orah, from darkness to light. It's going to go into, and he says, and what's that including? That darkness that's going to become light includes elu nefashot shel Adar Sheni pchutot, even those in the shamot of the Adar Shenis, the poshim, the sinners, the amei aratzot, even those people that are that don't know, they're not connected. Even they are going to be elevated to the level of the Dor Shel Mashiach. They're going to be the generation of the Mashiach, the Dor De'ah, Dor Shel Moshe, Dor Shel Nissan La'atid. We're going to connect Adar to Nissan. These are going to be the greatest generation that's going to bring about the geulah. And then he closes with one last idea. It's actually an idea we said over back in the end of the Torah by Bezot Bracha. We brought over some of his Divrei Torah that he wrote on that parsha. He says a similar idea right now. He says, every Jew corresponds to a letter in the Torah. Right? The 600,000 Jews correspond to the 600,000 letters to the Torah. And he explained over there, and he explains right now here by his Purim Torah, that probably the very end of the Torah corresponds to the Jews of the last generations of the Galut, of the end of the exile, of the darkness, the Adar Sheni Jews, the Jews who look like sinners, look so far away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says the last psukim of the Torah, and we know the last psukim of the Torah, especially the last 8 verses of the Torah, which Moshe Rabbeinu wrote in tears. They said he wrote it b'dema, which one approach says he wrote it in tears. We had the Kabbalistic approach that he wrote it mixed letters. Okay, side idea. But Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it in tears. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu crying when he writes these last 8 psukim? Because they're the generation of that have it so hard. It's so difficult. It's going to be the darkness of the galut, the yisurin, the suffering of the Jewish people. But also, he's going to see Jewish people that are so far removed. They're so far away. They seem so far from Moshe Rabbeinu and the Torah. But so he's crying. Those are the tears. He says that it says that some of those psukim hint to the breaking of the luchot. The shvirat luchot is hinted to in those psukim as well. That Moshe Rabbeinu sometimes has to break things for the sake of tshuva, for the sake of fixing the Jewish people. But it's a time of sin. It hints to the egel hazahav. It's a time of difficulty. So he's writing it in tears. There's another opinion of the Gemara that actually Yoshua is the one that writes those last psukim, or some say both happened at the exact same time. So some people think, it's so far away. Yoshua's even writing it. Moshe's writing it in tears, not even writing it with ink, maybe. But he says, but we have to understand that no. Moshe Rabbeinu, he died in Adar Sheni. He died in this time period. We write at the end of the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu dies at the end. Moshe is there too. He might be there in tears. It might be there in difficulty, but he's there. We know that before Moshe Rabbeinu dies, the Torah tells us that lo ke'ata eino velo nas lecho. His eyes didn't become dim, and his vigor, the juices inside of him didn't dry up, meaning he had those tears. He had what to work with. And it's Moshe Rabbeinu's tears that are going into these last psukim, that are giving extra koach to, and he's dying in these psukim. He's being buried in these psukim, being buried outside the land of Israel in the Galut, because Moshe Rabbeinu and his koach is with those as well. Don't make the mistake to think that Moshe Rabbeinu is not connected to those Jews who are so far away. Moshe is with them as well. And he says, according to the opinion that says that Yoshua wrote those last psukim, or maybe he wrote it with ink, filling it in. So there's a halacha, the Rambam brings down an interesting halacha that he says those last 8 psukim, he writes in Hilchot Tefillah, Perek Gimel halacha Vav, mipnei shekatevam Yoshua mutar likro otam beyachid. Because Yoshua wrote them, you don't need a minyan. Fascinating halacha. For those last 8 psukim, it can be written by a It can be read by a yachid. So I was thinking this works very well with our other divrei Torah about the tribe of Dan, that they're all about the yachidim, they're all about the individuals, saving those individuals, because it's a Torah of the individuals. Those people who aren't always making it to minyan, they're not always making it and being part of the collective Jewish people. They have their own personal struggles, but therefore we see these last 8 psukim can even be read by the person or by the individual. Lanutati, maybe we can say that, but he also connects it to the fact that why does Yoshua write these last 8? Because Yoshua is the one that's going to fight that war against Amalek. He's going to bring the whole Jewish people together to be united to fight for the people of Dan that were being attacked by Amalek in the back. So Yoshua also has that connection. The one that's going to fight to conquer the land of Israel. He's fighting to conquer, to save the Shevet Dan as well. He's fighting for those sinners as well, even though they're so far away, even though they correspond to the Shrei Luchot, their shorish is so deep and so great. He says that's why also what happens to the last 8 psukim of the Torah. The last 8 psukim of the Torah we read, we finish the Torah on Simchat Torah, and then we start right over with Bereshit. And he writes Bereshit is the Bereshit, it's the Rosh. He says Moshe Rabbeinu really corresponds to the Rosh. That's Tribe of Yehuda is the Rosh. They're the head. We're connecting Dan to Yehuda. We're connecting Betzalel to Oholiab. We're connecting the sinners to Moshe Rabbeinu. We're connecting the month of Adar, even Adar Sheni, to Nissan. We're connecting the back of the bus, the people that are traveling last, who are finding all of the lost products and bringing back those people back up to Yehuda, even bringing them back to the very front. It's the full circle of how they encamp. Shevet Dan, who seems so far away, the one symbolizing the Galut, his other properties by the corner up by Syria. It's the story of Purim that's taking place in the Galut. It's the Jewish people that on the surface weren't doing things right, but ultimately they look deep inside. We know Hushim ben Dan is the one that chops off Esau's head, or at least does the first smack on the back. Who is Hushim ben Dan? His name was Hushim senses because he lost the sense. He was deaf. He might have been a mute as well. He didn't have the full hergesh, he didn't have the full emotion, the full understanding, the full grasp. Yet he's the one that's going to fight against Esau. The Jew that's so far away that Moshe is crying for, ultimately he's always going to know he's a Jew. He's going to know when to fight for being part of the Jewish people, how to connect to the Jewish people. And even though he's kicked out, he's in Galut, he's outside of the clouds, he's so far away, it's Dafka him that's going to be saved on Purim. That's Dafka him that's going to be saved by Yoshua, the Mashiach ben Yosef. It's Dafka him that's going to be placed right next to the area of Yehuda. It's Dafka him that's going to be the mother of Mashiach to connect with the father Mashiach for Yehuda, to make that full connection, and our li'av of our parasha connecting to the Betzalel, because it's going to be through this connection that we're going to go from a Purim to a Nissan. We're going to go from a Adar to Nissan, a Purim to a Pesach. We're going to go from a darkness to a light, a winter time to a springtime, to a full geulah, to a full hidush, a full renewal, a full chodesh hazeh lachem. B'ezrat Hashem, with these ideas, we basically connected everything taking place right now in the time of the year, along with our parashiot, to give us that inspiration that we're going to get there. We're going to get to that great light. Shabbat Shalom.